We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and...
The atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace was completely frozen, filled with a suffocating tension that seemed to strip away the grandeur of the room. It was an ordinary afternoon when the senior royals gathered for an unscheduled meeting, but everyone present knew that the decisions made today would alter the course of the British monarchy forever. Sitting at the long mahogany table, Princess Catherine maintained a rigid posture, her hands flat against the polished wood, as if seeking a physical anchor amidst the emotional storm. Opposite her, King Charles sat with an unsigned document before him, a formal proposal containing 24 pages of conditions that represented Meghan Markle's final, desperate plea to return to the royal fold. The room had been dead silent for what felt like an eternity, the only sound being the faint ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Then, without raising her voice, without a single hint of dramatic flair or anger, Princess Catherine delivered a sentence that shattered any lingering illusions of reconciliation. She looked directly at the document and spoke four merciless words with a chilling calmness that made them impossible to misunderstand. There is no way back. Those four words effectively sealed the fate of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, drawing an invisible but permanent line in the sand that the royal family would never cross again. For years, the public had watched a relentless cycle of media battles, private leaks, and public accusations, but this precise moment marked the absolute end of negotiations. Catherine had once genuinely imagined a different future, a time when she and Meghan could have been allies, supporting each other through the unique isolation of royal duty. Now, the Princess of Wales was personally turning the key to lock that door forever, realizing that mercy could no longer be granted at the expense of the institution's survival. The formal proposal submitted by Meghan was not a simple request of forgiveness. It was a highly calculated strategic framework asking for a 6-month trial return to selected public duties. The document carefully outlined a plan where Meghan would undertake limited public work on behalf of the crown, deliberately designed to look like a compromise that could heal the family's fractured public image. To make the arrangement appear safe and non-threatening, Meghan had offered several strict conditions. She would accept control of public appearances, waive the right to an independent palace communications office, and agree to firm, legally binding limits on media contact. In the world of the monarchy, a palace office is the essential machinery that manages a working royal schedule, staffing, and public statements. By offering to give up this independent team, Meghan was trying to signal total submission to the central palace authority. However, as Prince William and King Charles studied every single condition line by line, they did not see a genuine peace offering. They saw a Trojan horse. Beneath the polished language of compromise lay a dangerous pattern that the royal family had spent years trying to survive. Catherine listened intently as the final security and public relations recommendations were delivered by palace aides, her grip tightening on the table. When the moment came to formulate the official response, the royal decision-makers did not ask for revisions or offer a counterproposal. They rejected the request in full, denying the trial period, canceling the requested private summit, and closing every possible path back into a working royal life. Thousands of miles away in California, Prince Harry received a formal rejection beside Meghan. His immediate reaction, one of fierce defiance and utter disbelief. He refused to accept that this answer was final, pacing the room agitatedly before turning to his wife as if expecting her to find a hidden loophole in the cold palace legalities. But Meghan remained perfectly still, staring at the official refusal until the reality of the words settled into something far colder than a simple rejection. It was a complete collapse of her last repaired appeal, an absolute shutdown from an institution she thought she could still negotiate with. Prince William understood the profound gravity of the silence that followed the decision, knowing that this was not a sudden act of malice or a petty punishment for a single argument. It was a culmination of a confidential review, a meticulous private examination of sensitive events that traced years of systematically broken trust. The palace had carefully documented a damaging pattern, where private family conversations repeatedly transformed into prime-time public entertainment, and unresolved fears about future book disclosures kept the institution in a state of constant anxiety. Before leaving the briefing room, William leaned close to Catherine and lowered his voice. warning her that Meghan's plea contained one specific hidden sentence that the rest of the family had not yet been permitted to see. He warned that this single sentence had the power to reopen every old wound Catherine had fought so hard to close. The royal door was now officially locked, but the secret words embedded within Meghan's final request were about to reveal exactly why she believed that door should have remained open, setting the stage for a behind-the-scenes confrontation that would test the very limits of the monarchy's power. Long before Catherine became the institutional force delivering this final refusal, there was a time when she stood close enough to Meghan to hope for a genuine sisterhood. They were supposed to be the dual faces of a modern royal generation, capturing the world's imagination together. Instead, every small misunderstanding grew heavier under the intense glare of global scrutiny. Every prolonged silence became an object of dark suspicion, and every clumsy attempt at reconciliation only created a more dangerous trap. Now, one woman was pleading for a final path back to the only home her husband had ever truly known, while the other firmly believed that opening that door would instantly destroy what little stability remained inside the palace walls. Catherine carried a massive burden that went far beyond personal hurt. She had learned through years of relentless trial that a private family conflict could instantly mutate into a national crisis, placing her husband, her 3 young children, and the ancient institution itself under unbearable pressure. For a working royal, personal feelings must always be secondary to the preservation of the crown, a discipline that Catherine had mastered through her own silent sacrifices. Meghan, however, viewed this shared history through an entirely different lens, believing that her royal chapter had been unfairly frozen by institutional anger rather than ended by her own choices. In her mind, a limited, highly controlled return was a brilliant opportunity to rebuild damaged family ties, while proving to the world that she could serve the public without completely surrendering her personal independence. Yet, every single condition she inserted into her proposal served as a painful reminder of the massive divide, asking relatives who had never truly understood her to sit in judgment of her worth. As the reality of the total rejection began to spread through the restricted corridors of the palace, the hidden machinery of the monarchy prepared for the inevitable fallout. Knowing that while the formal answer had been delivered, the human cost of Catherine's merciless words was only beginning to unfold. The shockwave of the total rejection did not remain confined to the immediate family, as the hidden machinery behind palace walls scrambled to manage the deep internal divisions that were suddenly bubbling to the surface. Monarchy rarely reveals how its most painful decisions are made, maintaining a flawless public facade of unity, while the individuals holding the highest titles engage in fierce battles for institutional survival. Behind the heavily guarded doors of the palace, King Charles had called a restricted family council, an emergency closed meeting limited strictly to senior royals handling matters too sensitive for ordinary staff, security advisors, or public debate. Queen Camilla, Prince William, Princess Catherine, and Princess sat in absolute silence as the monarch held a heavy gold pen, his hand hovering over the unsigned refusal document as if unable to make the final downward stroke. Charles felt the agonizing division more sharply than anyone else in the room, torn between his constitutional obligation as a reigning king to protect the crown and his deeply buried instincts as a father who knew that signing this document might push Prince Harry beyond a point of no return. The atmosphere grew heavier with every passing second, the silence broken only by the rustling of the 24-page proposal that had now become a battlefield. Prince William spoke with absolute certainty, his voice steady as he reinforced Catherine's position by arguing that royal stability could not be built on a temporary, fragile agreement that ignored years of systematically eroded trust. The future king made it clear that a 6-month trial return might appear control on paper, but a single public contradiction, an unexpected media leak, or a private argument would immediately drag the family back into a destructive cycle of public damage. Queen Camilla broke the heavy silence carefully, suggesting with a tone of quiet caution that a tightly managed, limited return might actually reduce the relentless public hostility and prevent the family estrangement from hardening into a permanent identity. She did not defend the actions that had fractured the family, but she feared that a total, merciless refusal would turn a private wound into an unyielding public war that the monarchy would have to fight for decades. Princess N, renowned for her unwavering dedication to duty over personal comfort, waited until the room fell completely still before delivering a cold, pragmatic perspective that shifted the weight of the discussion. She looked directly at her brother and stated that mercy did not require the restoration of official status, titles, or institutional influence, emphasizing that personal compassion could easily remain private, while the formal authority of the crown remained completely protected. Catherine then took the ultimate risk to end the internal debate, leaning forward to read aloud the most dangerous sentence hidden within Meghan's written request. Through the documented proposal, the Duchess had warned that a total rejection could lead Harry to reconsider what he had previously protected from public discussion, a line that the council immediately interpreted as a veiled threat against the family's privacy. William heard unbearable pressure, Princess and heard an unacceptable condition attached to a plea for forgiveness, and Queen Camilla lowered her gaze as the true nature of the negotiation became undeniable. King Charles looked directly at Catherine, his eyes filled with profound sorrow as he finally lowered the pen and signed the official refusal, sealing the institutional verdict. The monarch had made the rejection absolute, but everyone in the restricted council knew that a courtier would merely deliver the formal letter, leaving Catherine to carry the heavy human cost of those 4 merciless words into the open world. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the finality of the response hit the Duke and Duchess of Sussex with the force of a sudden betrayal. Harry had mentally prepared himself for strict conditions, long administrative delays, or even a humiliating period of total silence from the palace, but he had never anticipated an absolute, unconditional shutdown. The official document did not offer a path for a later review, a date for a future summit, or even a ceremonial avenue toward eventual reconsideration. It completely severed their working royal connection. Harry's initial shock rapidly turned into a sharp, burning anger, and he openly accused Catherine of orchestrating this outcome from the very beginning, waiting for the exact moment she possessed the authority to enforce a permanent ban. Meghan, however, did not argue or attempt to defend the Princess of Wales. Instead, she quietly closed the folder and removed a ring she'd been spinning nervously, realizing that she had spent years begging to be understood by people who had already written her final judgment. Harry reached for his phone, determined to release an immediate, aggressive public statement to challenge the palace before they could control the global narrative. But Meghan stopped him. In a recorded private conversation later preserved in their personal archives, she warned him that reacting with visible anger would prove exactly what the restricted council feared, showing the world that any return would only bring another chaotic storm to the gates of the monarchy. Moments later, a separate, direct message arrived from Prince William to his brother, stating coldly that the rejection concerned institutional duty and was not a personal attack on their relationship as brothers. Harry stared at the screen, reading the words twice before refusing to respond, allowing a cold, heavy silence to become his only answer as the realization of his permanent exile settled over him. Back in London, as the late-night meetings finally ended and the relentless palace machinery fell completely silent, Catherine was left alone with the one question that institutional authority could never answer for her. She sat in the quiet room, wondering if she had truly protected the future of the monarchy, or she had simply become the cold, unyielding person who closed the final door on a broken family. William found her alone, with no advisors nearby and no rehearsed public relations language between them, allowing the future queen to finally speak as a deeply wounded woman. She admitted to her husband that while she still believed the rejection was absolutely necessary to protect their children and their dedicated staff from absorbing another round of public crisis, the phrase, "there is no way back," had sounded far harsher than she had ever intended. She had sought structural finality, not human humiliation, but she knew that once those 4 words were spoken, they no longer belonged to her. They belonged to history, and the public storm was already gathering at the palace gates. By the arrival of sunrise, the heavy phrase had already escaped the private rooms where it was first spoken, rolling out into the world like an unstoppable tidal wave. The words "there is no way back" suddenly appeared across global news broadcasts, splashed on the front pages of morning newspapers, and ignited a firestorm of endless digital conversations far beyond the locked palace gates. Some royal commentators heard immense courage and long overdue boundaries in Princess Catherine's words, while others interpreted her stance as an act of cold, institutional severity. Yet, despite the deeply divided public opinions, nearly everyone wrapped their heads around the exact same definitive reality. This was absolutely not another temporary family feud destined to be swept away by forced, ceremonial smiles at the next public event. The monarchy had publicly and uncomfortably accepted that one significant chapter of the family's shared life was entirely over and would never be rewritten or renegotiated under any circumstances. Prominent global broadcasters immediately termed the total rejection as the most definitive and harsh royal response directed toward Meghan since her initial dramatic departure years ago. Official duty, which means carrying out public work on behalf of the crown through national events, patronages, and formal engagements, was now permanently off the table, removing every realistic route back to that old life. Palace staff received one strict, sweeping instruction from senior officials. They were to actively avoid personal attacks in their briefings and instead repeat the exact same clear distinction whenever press questions arose. They reiterated that private family relationships could theoretically continue, but official royal roles would never be restored, emphasizing finality without unnecessary public cruelty. However, the media argument quickly devolved into something far more volatile and personal, as Catherine's fiercely loyal supporters praised her for protecting the long-term stability of the crown after years of calculated distrust. They firmly believed she had defended Prince William, their 3 young children, and a future monarchy that simply could not survive another exhausting cycle of private conflict turning into public damage. On the other side of the media war, her sharpest critics saw something far harsher, openly accusing the future queen of turning a deeply wounded, fragile family relationship into an irreversible institutional punishment. Prince Harry watched the nonstop television coverage from his home in California with a growing sense of profound frustration and isolation, listening to global commentators debate his marital loyalty and personal future as if his deep grief belonged to them. He heard strangers describe Meghan as completely defeated and Catherine as thoroughly victorious, but neither of those shallow words matched the complex pain he felt inside. There was absolutely no victory to be found in permanently losing the last remaining path back to his family and the world he grew up in. Outside Buckingham Palace, which stands as a monarch's main official London residence and a powerful public symbol of royal authority, a small, somber crowd began to gather beneath a newspaper board carrying the massive headline, "No Way Back." One emotional woman walked up and placed 2 distinct photographs against the iron railings, one of William and Harry standing close together as happy children, and another of the brothers completely divided as adults, capturing the tragic human loss that the media arguments entirely ignored. The media storm shifted again when a major broadcaster revealed through a documented palace briefing that Catherine had actually sent Meghan a compassionate, deeply personal private note shortly after the formal rejection was signed. The unexpected disclosure changed the public mood instantly, as the princess no longer appeared completely unforgiving, and the Duchess no longer looked like someone preparing an aggressive, immediate counterattack. Meghan ultimately made her final, definitive choice in total silence, resolving that she would issue no public retaliation, no angry primetime interviews, and no further public accusations against the institution. Harry deeply understood that her sudden, quiet restraint would deny the palace the chaotic media, war they feared most, weaponizing silence in a way they never expected. The final chapter did not end with a dramatic public explosion, another round of bitter accusations, or a shocking palace reversal. It ended with 2 determined women silently accepting a reality that neither had originally wanted. Meghan would never return to official royal duty, and Catherine would never withdraw the 4 merciless words that made that reality unmistakable. Their relationship was not magically repaired, and the fractured family was certainly not suddenly healed. Yet the exhausting cycle of pleading, rejection, retaliation, and renewed conflict finally stopped. For the first time in years, structural finality created a heavy silence instead of another public battle. Meghan permanently withdrew the formal request, accepting that her future would exist entirely outside the working monarchy, and in the last realistic route back to that life. Harry, though deeply hurt, abandoned all plans for an immediate media response, realizing that defending his wife did not require reopening every painful conflict with William and Charles. The deep anger was still there, and so was a profound grief, but for once, he allowed silence to do what another public statement never could. Catherine also began to fully understand the deep, lasting meaning of her own words, realizing that there is no way back did not mean there could never be courtesy, compassion, or private contact. It simply meant the former official arrangement could never be restored. closing an institutional door without declaring the family entirely beyond human feeling. Prince William supported that firm boundary while leaving a quiet line of personal communication open to Harry, never pretending the brothers were reconciled but stepping back from further public destruction. Catherine received formal confirmation through a documented palace notice that the plea had been officially withdrawn, setting the paper down in the quiet room. William waited beside her, knowing the decision had protected the future while deepening the permanent scars of the present. Catherine finally looked at him and said, "Then let this be the end of the war." The monarchy emerged far more disciplined but deeply untouched by joy, choosing stability over reunion, and accepting that preserving the ancient institution sometimes meant ending the comforting illusion that every family rupture could be reversed. Meghan lost her final route back to official royal life, while Catherine gained the absolute authority and the heavy burden of defining the monarchy's permanent limits. Neither woman truly won. One walked completely away from the crown, while the other remained inside it, forever carrying the invisible, immense cost of the doors she had closed. There was no way back to what they had once been, but by finally accepting that hard truth, Catherine, Meghan, Harry, William, and the monarchy found a way to stop moving further apart.